Week 7, Hierarchical Clustering Techniques. Welcome! This week is focused on hierarchical clustering, a method that builds a tree of clusters. You will learn its basics, how to use it with Python, and try it on the mall customers dataset. Let us get started. Running the cell now. What is clustering? Clustering is a way to group points or objects that are similar. Hierarchical clustering builds nested groups, like a family tree. This is useful in marketing, image analysis, genetics, and more. Running the cell now. Let us load our dataset and peek at its structure. This section loads the mall customers dataset. We suppress warnings for a distraction-free experience. Pandas helps us handle tabular data like spreadsheets. Import NumPy as NP. We set the random seed to 42 for reproducibility. We grab the dataset straight from a public link. Now the dataset is ready in our workspace. Let us see its shape. This tells us row and column counts. Previewing a few rows helps us see what the data actually looks like. Running the cell now. The output shows the dataset shape as 205, meaning it has 200 customers and 5 features including age, income, and spending score. The first 3 rows give a glimpse of how these features vary across individuals, which is important for understanding the data points will cluster based on their similarities. This setup helps us prepare for hierarchical clustering by revealing key columns that influence customer grouping. Now, let us see which features or columns we have. This cell asks Python to show us all column names in our dataset. Knowing the column names helps us decide which ones to explore or cluster on. Running the cell now. This output shows the columns in our dataset, revealing key customer attributes like age, annual income, and spending score. Noticing these helps us understand what features we can use to group similar customers through clustering. The choice of relevant columns is crucial for meaningful hierarchical clusters in marketing analysis. What columns do you think will be useful for grouping similar customers? Before clustering, let us check if any data is missing. We quickly check data types, non-null counts, and look for missing values. Missing data can break algorithms, so it is best to check now. Here, we count how many values might be missing in each column. Running the cell now. This output shows that our dataset has 200 customer records with no missing values, which is ideal for clustering. Notice we have key columns like age, annual income, and spending score, all numeric and ready for analysis. Ensuring complete and clean data helps hierarchical clustering produce meaningful customer groups. If you spot any missing data, how might you handle it? Let us pick the columns we want to group by. Age, income, and spending tell us a lot about customers. We specify which columns should be used for our analysis. We create a new smaller table that just includes these features. Copying helps avoid accidental edits to the original data. We preview the first 3 records to check our selection. Running the cell now. This output shows the first 3 rows of the selected features for clustering, age, annual income, and spending score. Notice how each row represents a customer with different values across these key columns, which will help group similar customers together. By focusing on these features, the code sets up the data for hierarchical clustering to discover natural groupings based on spending habits and demographics. Clustering works best when numbers are scaled fairly. Otherwise, big numbers could overpower small ones. Here we use a tool to scale all features. Standardization shifts them to have average 0 and size 1. The scaler is trained on our data. We apply the transformation to our selected features. Printing means lets us double-check that scaling worked. Running the cell now. The output shows that the means of all columns after scaling are effectively 0, confirming the features are standardized. This step is crucial in clustering because it ensures each feature contributes equally, preventing bias from differing scales. Standardizing helps the hierarchical clustering algorithm group points based on true patterns rather than scale differences. Why do you think scaling all features can be important for grouping? What is hierarchical clustering? Hierarchical clustering builds a tree structure that shows how similar different samples are. It does not require us to specify a number of groups at the beginning. There are two types, agglomerative, which means bottom-up, and divisive, which means top-down. Today we will use the agglomerative approach. Running the cell now. Let us see how hierarchical clustering builds groups using a tree diagram called a dendrogram. We import functions for hierarchical clustering. We also bring in matplotlib for making charts. The linkage function calculates how to group customers based on similarity. We set the ward method, which tries to keep groups tight. A bigger figure gives us room to view the results. The dendrogram function draws our tree of clusters. We add a title for context. Labels let us know how to read the horizontal axis. The vertical axis tells us how far apart two groups are. Finally, we display our diagram. Running the cell now. This dendrogram visually represents the hierarchical clustering of samples based on their similarity, with each branch showing how samples merge step by step. Notice the height at which branches join indicates the distance or dissimilarity between clusters, helping us understand the natural groupings without predefining cluster numbers. This output highlights how hierarchical clustering builds a tree structure that reveals relationships among customers. We do not always have to pick cluster numbers ourselves. The dendrogram helps. We replot the tree diagram. The figure is sized for comfort. Dendrogram shows the tree of merges again. Title gives context. We draw a dashed line at height 7 to help see groupings. Where the line splits branches, that is one possible answer. The chart now guides us to possible numbers of clusters. Running the cell now. This dendrogram visually represents the hierarchical clustering of customers, showing their similarity as a tree structure. The red dashed line at height 7 helps us decide the number of clusters by cutting the tree at that level, grouping customers below this threshold into distinct clusters. Notice how this method allows us to choose cluster numbers dynamically, without pre-specifying them. Try adjusting the height and see what happens. Can you spot the main big splits? Agglomerative clustering in action. The agglomerative clustering algorithm will form our customer groups. Let us try grouping our customers into 5 segments. Running the cell now. We are ready to actually assign customers into groups. We import a tool for grouping from scikit-learn. We choose to create 5 customer segments. We set up our clustering model to use 5 groups. Ward linkage tries to make tight, similar groups. The model analyzes all customers and assigns each to a group. Let us see the group numbers for our first 10 customers. Running the cell now. The output shows the first 10 cluster labels assigned by the agglomerative clustering algorithm, alternating between clusters 4 and 0. This pattern indicates the model is grouping customers based on similarity, and the presence of distinct cluster numbers reflects successful segmentation into 5 groups. Notice how these labels will help us understand different customer segments for targeted strategies. Now, let us put the cluster information into our data. This way, we know which customer belongs to which group. We create a new column in our data for group numbers. This is called labeled data because each record has a cluster label. Previewing these records shows their age, income, spending, and assigned group. Running the cell now. Here we see the first 7 customers with their assigned cluster labels from the agglomerative clustering algorithm, grouped into 5 segments as intended. Notice how customers with similar spending scores and incomes tend to share the same cluster, such as clusters 0 and 4, highlighting meaningful grouping based on their features. This confirms the algorithm's ability to categorize customers into distinct, data-driven segments for targeted analysis. How could this segmentation help a business owner? Let us make these groups visible on a chart. We will compare income with spending. We start a scatter plot for visualizing groupings. Set up the plot with a specified figure size. Loop over each cluster number to plot its points separately. Begin plotting scatter points for the current cluster. Select the annual income values for customers in this cluster for the x-axis. Select the spending score values for customers in this cluster for the y-axis. Add a label to identify the cluster in the legend. Set the label for the x-axis to indicate annual income. Set the label for the y-axis to indicate spending score. Add a title to explain what the plot represents. Show a legend to match colors with cluster labels. Display the completed scatter plot. Running the cell now. This scatter plot visualizes the 5 customer segments formed by agglomerative clustering based on annual income and spending score. Notice how each cluster groups customers with similar income and spending patterns, highlighting distinct behavioral segments for targeted marketing. The clear separation between clusters confirms that the algorithm effectively differentiated customer groups in these key features. Try changing the features plotted. What do you see if you use age instead? What do the clusters mean? Each color represents a group of people who shop similarly. You might notice groups with high income and high spending, or low spenders with moderate income. Clustering reveals customer types without manual labels. Running the cell now. Let us describe each group by its average age, income, and spending. We group our data using the cluster label. Calculating means gives us a summary of each group's main traits. Printing this summary shows the typical customer in each segment. Running the cell now. This table shows the average age, income, and spending score for each cluster, revealing distinct shopper profiles. Notice Cluster 2 combines high income with high spending, while Cluster 3 has high income but very low spending, highlighting different behaviors within affluent groups. This helps us understand how each cluster groups similar shoppers based on their habits and financial status. Which group would you target for a luxury product? Suppose a new customer walks in. What group should they go into? We create a pretend customer with age 30, income 60, and spend score 80. We put these values into a data frame with the right column names. We scale the numbers to match our earlier step. We combine all previous customers and the new one for clustering. Our model reassigns each point and tells us the new customer's group. The printout shows which group this person would belong to. Running the cell now. The output shows that the new customer with age 30, income 60, and spending 80 is assigned to cluster 2. This means they fit into the group of shoppers whose patterns the model has identified, helping us understand which existing customer segment they resemble. Notice how the code scaled the input before predicting, ensuring the new data aligns with how clusters were originally formed. Create your own sample and try it. What happens if you change the spending score? Hierarchical vs center-based clustering. Hierarchical clustering creates a tree with nested groups. Methods like k-means make flat partitions. Hierarchical clustering works well with small and medium datasets or when the cluster shape is not simple. You can use dendrograms to help decide on the right number of clusters. Running the cell now. Let us explore how different ways of linking clusters change the tree. This is a comment describing the challenge to run hierarchical clustering with different linkage methods. We define a list of linkage methods we will try. We start a loop to apply each linkage method to the data. We compute the hierarchical clustering linkage on scaled data using the current method. We create a new figure to plot the dendrogram with a specific size. We plot the dendrogram for the computed linkage, hiding the labels for cleanliness. We set the title of the plot to show which linkage method is used. We display the plot so the dendrogram appears below. Running the cell now. This output shows dendrograms for hierarchical clustering using different linkage methods, illustrating how the cluster merges vary with each approach. Notice the shape and height of the branches differ, reflecting how clusters are combined based on single, complete, average, or Ward criteria, key to understanding the flexibility and interpretability of hierarchical clustering compared to flat methods like k-means. This visualization helps connect linkage choice to the nested grouping structure produced. Which linkage method do you think makes the clearest groups in this data? If you are getting value from this video, please consider subscribing and commenting with your questions. Saving your results lets you use them again or share your findings. We save the entire data with clusters into a new spreadsheet file. Saving with index off keeps it neat for sharing. You will see a message when saving is done. Running the cell now. This output confirms that the clustered dataset, containing the group labels from either hierarchical or k-means clustering, has been successfully saved as a CSV file. Saving the results allows you to revisit and analyze the clusters later, supporting ongoing exploration of how different clustering methods segment the data. This step is key for comparing hierarchical versus center-based clustering outcomes outside the immediate session. Recap and practice. Today you learned how to prepare and scale data for clustering, build and read a dendrogram, form customer groups with agglomerative clustering, visualize and describe clusters. Try the practice prompts and revisit the video if you need a refresher. Running the cell now. Next steps. Try clustering your own favorite datasets. Play with different features and see how the tree changes. If you enjoyed this lesson, remember to subscribe for more beginner-friendly Python data tutorials. Happy clustering! Running the cell now.